Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHDF1, and welcome to episode 21 of the podcast. Hopefully you guys, no matter where you are in the world, are doing well on this Saturday. Also, again, sorry about the echo. I am in my new studio for today's podcast. We're still getting things set up, cameras and sound equipment. Hopefully by next week, we should have some things in place to help out the quality in the studio, but it's going well at the moment in my opinion. But yeah, hopefully you guys are doing well, and today we are going to be looking at, will the 2019 regulations actually work? Will they actually improve the racing? Will we get more overtakes? Will we get more battles on track? We're going to try and go through all the regulations today and kind of determine whether they're actually going to work or not, and why certain regulation changes have come into place. But as ever, I have to be joined by my podcast guest as always, Nibloe. Nib, how are you doing for the first podcast of the new year?
I am doing very well, mate, and I hope everyone in the chat, and including yourself, has had a very happy new year.
Yeah, hopefully you did too, and hopefully as well for the chat, hopefully you all had a very good Christmas and New Year period. But we are now going to get into these regulations. We're going to go one by one. There's not a massive amount of changes for 2019, but we will go one by one and look at the most important ones coming for this season and whether it's going to actually help the racing. So we'll go to the first one, which is the front wings are now going to be simplified with standardized end plates and no upper flaps on the outer sides of the wing. Now with end plates standardized, that's a good move because no one can really, I guess, gain or develop that area as much as they probably want to. And the reason there is now no upper flaps on the outer side of the wing or sides of the wing is because you may have heard of a term called outwash on the front wing, which causes the car behind to wash out to the side of the track when following another car, because those upper flaps created that by pushing the air around the car. That's what the upper flaps were doing on the 2017 and 2018 cars. That is now banned, and I guess that is what simplifies the front wing. They're not going to have these certain devices on the front wing, which I understand. If you can put aerodynamic pieces on your car, you should, but I just feel like, Nib, pieces like that, when it comes to the show and having great racing, I just feel like pieces of this on the front wing are kind of just pointless. We should have more simple front wings. One, so newer people can actually know what's going on and know how the aerodynamic of the car works. But also, again, it seems as though they're putting too much on the front wings. What do you think about the first one there?
Yeah, I have to agree with you. The front wings for 2019 look absolutely horrific in my opinion. Making them 200 millimeters wider, extending them right to the width of the tire, it makes them look pretty awful. But there has been some important changes. Obviously, the upper flaps with the now they can't move the air from out of the way of the front tire, so that's not going to create as much outwash, that's for sure. The standardized end plates are good. Of course, Red Bull were the main innovators of that area of development in the mid-2010s. So the simplified front wings will definitely help, but according to Paddy Lowe, they will work, but also according to Adrian Newey, they will not work. So we don't really know if these front wings will work whatsoever. We will see after a couple of races. There's going to be a lot less downforce on the car for this year. But whether or not it will do anything to the racing, we shall see.
Yeah, when it comes to Paddy Lowe saying it's going to work, and Adrian Newey and a lot of other technical directors saying it's not going to work. I guess it's just a matter of interpretation of the new rules. I've noticed Paddy Lowe, he's been bigging up these rules a lot over the course of 2018. I'm kind of, when he's saying that, I'm kind of thinking now that maybe he's been working towards that the entire time. Maybe that's why the Williams car was so bad, but honestly, I don't think that is true. But I think he's kind of hoping that it improves the racing because, as we know, the Williams car is one of the fastest, if not the fastest, sometimes depending on how they set up the car in a straight line. If you can't overtake because of the downforce currently on the previous cars, then you're not going to be able to use that advantage. So maybe that's why he is saying that. We'll move on to the next one though, which is winglets mounted on brake ducts and blown axles are now banned. Now with the winglets, again, it's kind of the aerodynamicists. They're just putting as much aero on the car and as much wings on the car as they possibly can. So I think they're trying to stop that kind of silliness of just adding, aerodynamic pieces where you really shouldn't. And with the blown axles, that's absolutely fine for me because you can't use the wheel to gain aerodynamic performance, in my opinion. And also, just to make it clear, the Mercedes wheel hub, new innovation, I guess, during 2018, that is not a blown axle. That's what Ferrari tried to argue when seeking clarification from the FIA in Mexico against Mercedes. What Mercedes is doing with their wheel hub is not a blown axle. What Mercedes is doing essentially is they're cooling down the tyre and the wheel. So it's a cooling device, it's not an aerodynamic device. For example, in 2012, Red Bull used a blown axle, but they were doing it solely for aerodynamic effect, not to cool down the tyre or the wheel. They were doing it to get as much downforce and speed out of the car. Mercedes weren't doing that. You could argue that, by innovating with this, you could get better the lap time because you're managing your tyres better, but I don't think Mercedes have actually gained lap time out of using this device. I think maybe in the race they're more consistent with their lap times, but I don't think they've actually gained aerodynamically with that device. Nib, what do you think about that? Then the winglets mounted on the brake ducts and the blown axles now being banned.
Yeah, following along with the changes to the front wings, it makes sense. These rules, the brake ducts and stuff, just made the front of the car look a bit messy on occasion. And it will obviously decrease the amount of targeted directional airflow, which will of course help calm down the amount of turbulent air. And the blown axles, that's definitely a good move because, always been a little bit of a controversial point in the sport. And yeah, they're just not really ever been a fan of them. So yeah, it makes sense for those to go, and I'm happy to see them go.
Yeah, it does, because it, again, I understand using the front wings and the rear of the car, stuff like that to gain downforce, but it just seems as though they will stick a wing or a winglet on anything to gain downforce. And I think at the end of the day, it kind of takes the mick if you do that, just continuously putting constant error on the car, and I think it just gets a bit out of hand, to be honest, and I don't think it improves the racing by actually doing that. But we'll move on from that one and go on to the next one. Now this part of the car is an area of the 2018 cars that was very important to the downforce. So the barge boards are being lowered by 150 millimeters and moved forward by 100 millimeters. Now, the barge boards, again, were very important to the 2018 cars. They really helped the downforce of the car. You would have noticed during the car reveals this time last year that a lot of the teams, had already put a lot of development into that area of the car before the cars had even switched on and turned a wheel. So that area of development, it's still going to be developed, but essentially why they're lowering it and moving it forward is so it doesn't have as big of an effect on the car, when following another car, because I think it did have an effect. And these barge boards also were very present in Formula 1 around 2003, 2004, where sometimes we did get exciting racing, but we also had a similar problem back then of the cars not being able to really follow that well in the wake of another car. So I think this is the right move, but honestly, if it doesn't quite work, these new regulations, I could see barge boards being really cut back by the FIA. Nib, with barge boards, do you think this is the right move?
With the barge boards, it's still going to be the most developed area on the car, that's for sure. It's where you can gain the most downforce, as we've seen with Mercedes and Ferrari, and how much Red Bull improved their barge board area last season. So moving them forward and moving them lower is obviously going to reduce the effect that they have on the dirty air of the car, but I don't think this is going to help massively. 100mm change, 150mm lowering of them isn't going to help too much, but it's another little thing which could add up to making the racing better at the end of the day. So it could potentially be a good little change, but once again, something that which we haven't mentioned, very costly for the teams to make all of these changes, especially to teams like Williams, who are already struggling for money. And I must say, Paddy Lowe may have been maybe bigging up these rules because he can actually just completely throw out the 2018 Williams car, which was an absolute disaster, and start fresh. So that is potentially why Mr. Lowe has been bigging up these rule changes.
Yeah, that could be a reason why. Maybe he was praying for this once he actually saw the car out on track in pre-season testing. But yeah, it's going to be still an area of development for sure. But we'll move on from the barge boards and now go towards the rear of the car. Now, rear wing end plates now will no longer have horizontal gills. I believe, Nib, you said this as we were setting up for this podcast, that McLaren, I think, were the first, or one of the first, to debut this type of thing on the rear wings. And it turns out, even though it might look pretty to some people, it actually does have an effect on the aerodynamics of the car when following another car. It actually hurts. Say if I'm in a car and behind another, those gills are making my car, handle really poorly behind him, because it's creating just more turbulence and it's hurting, my car in the wake of his. So basically, it seems to me what they've done is they've identified the areas of the car which they know they can get rid of easily or easy enough. They've identified the areas of the car which create, the turbulent air, the extra turbulent air, and it seems as though they're just bit by bit trying to, get rid of the more simple ones, because horizontal gills, they do make a difference, but it's not a massive. It's not going to make a massive difference, really, is it, Nib, to say the rear downforce of the car?
No, it was just another idea that I think McLaren were the innovators of this design. I think it was at Austria in 2016, I think. So yeah, it's just a little aerodynamic advantage that can be gained. It's not going to be It's not going to make a massive difference on rear downforce, which the teams already have more than enough of. They already have enough mechanical grip from the massive rear tyres, so it shouldn't be a major concern to the teams. And hopefully, as I continue to say, this has a small but important effect on reducing the dirty air which the cars have to follow in the 2019 season.
Yeah, hopefully it does. But again, it's not a massive change, but I guess if it has a small effect and it does help, every little helps. And then we go on to the biggest change of the rear of the car and the rear wing. The DRS opening is increased from 65mm to 85mm, and the rear wing increases in width and height. Basically what they're trying to do is increase the effect of DRS, because again, as I just said, when it comes to them identifying the areas of the car where it's easiest enough to, to actually make a change, to actually make these cars better at racing, it's easier to try and increase the effect of DRS than it is to completely change the rear or the front of the car. So you could argue it's a bit lazy. Maybe they could have come up with another concept, but given the small amount of time they had to come up with these regulations and actually announce them and make them official, I guess it's the only thing they really could have done. Now, they have also, I believe the FIA have come out and said that they will monitor the amount of DRS zones for each Grand Prix depending on how these new regulations are actually working. So, for example, the first race in Melbourne, I think we will, to be safe, have 3 DRS zones. So if it doesn't work, we get, say, the same as 2018, if not slightly better. And then, again, if it doesn't quite work out in Australia, then maybe we'll have an extra one in Bahrain. But again, they said they're going to monitor it based on essentially the previous Grand Prix. So hopefully the first race in Melbourne, which it can be sometimes, I remember 2009, 1999, 2010, 2012, races like that, 2008. Hopefully the first race can be just as chaotic as possible, because the one thing I am scared about, Nib, is if these new regulations actually work a lot more than we thought they would, I'm a bit scared that the increased effect of DRS is actually going to increase the amount of fake overtakes, I guess you could say. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's definitely a concern. I think we mentioned this before we started the podcast as well, that hopefully the FIA, if they are noticing a trend, shorten the DRS zones to make sure that we don't have as much fake and artificial overtaking, because that's basically what the DRS is. It's not real overtaking. Never been a huge fan of the DRS, but it certainly has increased the a good amount of racing. So, well, overtakes. I wouldn't say racing. I'd say overtakes, because of course we all care about the overtakes, not about the racing. So yeah, this is another little promising change, but it could also backfire. But I'm sure the FIA will be right on top of it if anything goes astray.
And hopefully they are. And also, I hope that eventually with the cars we can get to a point where we don't need DRS anymore. I don't think that's going to come for a long time, but hopefully there does come a time where we won't need DRS anymore. These regulation changes, guys, just to let you know, is actually, I guess, a prelude to 2021. This is kind of a testing of the waters to see what this does, and if it doesn't work, then maybe they'll be even more radical in 2021. But yeah, this is kind of a 2021 part 1 of what is to come later on with the with the regulations. So hopefully, again, we do get to a point where DRS can be completely removed, because I would love to see close racing like we did for most of 2018, but without DRS, because it would feel even better. Because even you guys have to admit, with DRS, it does kind of feel sometimes a bit fake, especially when the car behind, if they have a lot better straight line speed and DRS, it can feel a bit fake at times. And the last big one is the maximum fuel levels are now raised to 110 kilograms from 105 kilograms. What this essentially does is it doesn't punish the taller or heavier drivers as much as it did when these new hybrid rules came into action in 2014, and also allows the teams to now push harder when it comes to their fuel. They don't have to save as much fuel as they used to. So hopefully that means that the drivers will be able to push harder. Maybe not for the entire Grand Prix, but definitely around the pit stop phases they can push, say, as hard as possible. Because it has seemed as though ever since 2014, the drivers for most of the Grand Prix are kind of just coasting it home. They're not really pushing anywhere near as hard as they could or really should be. But yeah, Nib, do you think this is a good thing?
I really see no point to it. I don't think it will have any real effect on anything at all. So I see this as really being a pointless change. They're still probably going to have to fuel save. 5 kilogram is fuel is nothing at all, really. So in my opinion, it's quite a pointless rule change. Kudos if it somehow miraculously works. But yeah, this is certainly one of the more puzzling and surprising rule changes for 2019.
Yeah, it's not going to make a massive difference. I guess the only thing is it won't, again, punish heavier or taller drivers. That's the one positive thing I've seen coming out of this new rule, and the reaction from people or on Twitter about this rule. So hopefully that is the case. But yeah, if you compare it to all the other rules, this is probably going to be the least effective, I think, on the cars, or at least one of the least effective on the cars. It's not going to make a massive difference, but hopefully it makes more of a difference than we are actually expecting. But I'll now quickly read off and summarise all of the rules. So, 1, simpler front wing with less aero pieces, so no upper flaps. 2, winglets on the brake ducts and blown axles are now banned. 3, barge boards are lowered by 150mm and moved 100mm forward. 4, DRS opening increased from 65 to 85mm. The rear wing now increases in width and height. The maximum fuel levels are now raised from 105 kilograms to 110 kilograms. And the rear wing end plates will no longer have horizontal gills. Again, as I said at the start, it's not a dramatic rule change. It's nothing like 10 years ago when we had the 2009 one, which basically reset the sport. But hopefully, again, it will make a difference. And Nib, have we missed any new rules?
There's a few new rules which are coming in. So there's obviously going to be the rear end plate lights, which will be added to the rear wing, which most of you would have seen Mercedes ran in pre-season testing last season, and they looked pretty cool. Remind me a lot of the LMP1 cars. So yeah, they looked pretty cool. There's also another rule where there will no longer be the safety car line where you used to be able to overtake after the safety car line. That will be completely gotten rid of, and it will now just be the checkered flag line. So no more cheeky overtakes by Michael Schumacher at the at the final corner. So there's a few other little ones which won't really make any difference. Of course, there is the changing of the minimum weight of the drivers. They now have to weigh, I think it's 80 kilograms And if they don't weigh 80 kilograms, there will be an increased ballast to make sure that it sort of levels out to about 80 kilos. So that's another little change that will help drivers like Nico Hulkenberg, and it certainly would have helped Mark Webber back in the day, because I remember Mark Webber after a race, his jawline and his cheeks were very, very prominent, and he looked very skinny. So that will certainly help a lot of the taller drivers. But apart from that, there is really nothing too much whatsoever.
Yeah, again, it's not as dramatic as maybe we hoped for, but with the getting rid of the safety car line, basically it's going back to what it used to be. Before we had the safety car line, what it used to be, say in the early to mid 2000s, before that, safety car would pull in and then you couldn't pass until after the start finish line. So it's basically just going back to how it used to be. I think the reason they've done that is because with the safety car line, it creates confusion, especially say at a track like Canada, where the safety car line is on the entry to the final chicane. So it's a very tricky, place, to try to go for a move once the safety car has come in. It's a lot simpler if you just do it at start finish line, and I think that's how it should be done. Yes, it means that drivers will be able to hold back more until they get to the start finish line, but I think it's more simple, instead of things like you said about Michael Schumacher passing Fernando Alonso that time in Monaco in 2010. It creates a bit of confusion, I think. But yeah, those are your 2019 regulations. Now, will they work? In my opinion, they will make a small difference, but not enough. I think we'll have maybe an increase in terms of overtaking or cars being able to follow better. I think it will increase by, 15 to 20%, but again, nothing dramatic. I just don't think that these changes you see on your screen is enough to make the cars follow better. And there's a lot of paddock insiders that also say the same thing, that this isn't really going to work. I think more has to come after this, I think. But again, we could be wrong. This might work, and we might end up with these regulations for longer than we thought. So we'll have to see. But Nib, do you think these are going to work or not?
I don't think there will be a massive change in anything, and I don't think we're going to go back to 2012 or anything. But we will see a small improvement. Usually when a car gets to about a second and a half to a second behind another car, they start struggling in the dirty air. So hopefully we start to see an improvement in that, and maybe say down to under a second, we start to see the cars not really, start to struggle a little bit in the dirty air. Hopefully we see some little changes in that, so that then they are able to stick in DRS and potentially make a move. That's certainly what I'm hoping for from these rule changes, but at the end of the day, I really don't think these will have the desired effect.
Yeah, with the example of the 2018 cars, as you said, once they got a second or a second and a half behind, they got affected by the turbulence of the car ahead. Even if they have that, but they still have DRS, at least the gap can kind of stay the same, because of course that car can still gain on them in the straights, so that can still help the car behind stay close enough to maybe go for a move later on. But yeah, just go back to plenty of 2018 races and 2017 races. Once a car gets a second or a second and a half behind, they don't really gain on the car ahead, because one, the car becomes very difficult to drive, and two, that's how you destroy your tyres, is by trying to fight the turbulent air, and that's what they're trying to get rid of, and hopefully it does work. But again, as me and Nib have said, if it does, it's probably not going to be that big, And people need to remember as well, 2018, at least in my opinion and Nib's opinion, was the best season of racing we've had since 2012. So 2018 wasn't as bad as people think. Improvements, of course, could be made, no doubt about it. We could have improvements when it comes to the racing, but 2018 wasn't as bad as people think. For example, if you look at every race after Spa, at the back end of last season, there wasn't really that boring of a race. Yeah, you could say Singapore, but we had that battle with Sorokin and Perez and all the cars behind him. So, yeah, I don't think it'll make a massive difference, but hopefully it makes more of a difference than we're thinking. But now, for the next, 5 minutes or so, I'm now going to read out what you guys have to say currently in the live chat. Also, don't forget, guys, Super Chat is available, so if you do want to use it, it's there for you guys to use. And also, if you're new to the channel, we do these podcasts every Saturday, whether it's not an F1 race weekend. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel on the bottom right of the screen. You can do it right there, or click on my channel name, go to my channel page and subscribe to the channel, and hit the notifications bell. Like this video, and if you're watching this after this has gone up, comment down below what you think of each new regulation, and do you think that these new 2019 regulations are actually going to work? I'm very interested to hear what you guys have to say, so make sure to comment down below what you think. But I'll read out some comments now if I can, to see what you guys have to say. Right, so let me have a read through now. Ben McCarthy, I wonder how much slower the cars will be next year with the aero. That's another thing when it comes to the pace of the cars. Was it you, Nib, who sent me an article about the teams already reaching 2018 downforce levels with in the MFD models? Was it you who sent it me?
Yes, it sure was.
Yeah, so I don't think the cars are really going to be any slower in 2019. I think they'll just find ways around it, develop even more, and make the cars even quicker. So, yeah, I don't think the cars are really going to get any slower. They're just going to get faster. This thing happened around the early 2000s, where they were putting rules in place to make the cars slower, but the teams just went faster until they literally had to make big changes like 2009 to kind of put a stop to it. So, yeah. Simon Cragland, yeah, it could be nice if DRS was removed if possible. It would be great. It would be great, but I think we're going to have it for a long time, unfortunately. The safety car rule is the only one I'm happy about. That's from Francisco. Great to see him. Also, I'll ask you, Nib, this question. This is from Simon Cragland. I'll answer this as well. Would you like refueling in the races again? I would, but it's never going to happen because it's not. It doesn't promote the message that the manufacturers and the sport is trying to promote with these hybrid power units. They were actually going to bring them back for 2017, but then they gave up on it because one, they do cost a lot to take around the world, and also it's not very green, if you know what I mean by that, and it is dangerous. We have seen plenty of pit fires in the past. Nib, would you like, even though it's probably never going to happen, would you like to see refueling again?
In an ideal world where we could get whatever we wanted, I would absolutely love for us to have refueling, but as you mentioned, it's never going to happen. It's too dangerous. You know, we've gone to these V6 hybrids for a reason, for the sport to portray a bit more of a greener image, to be better for the environment. We've seen too many fires in the past, and we've seen too many teams being very cheeky with the fuel. I remember what's his name? I can't remember the name, but the ex-McLaren mechanic. He said that they used to have a a stethoscope. Is that what it's called when you can hear the heartbeat that the doctors have? Something like that. They used to put that on the fuel rig, and they could hear quicker when the fuel was going to stop. So they basically by having basically a doctor, well, it wasn't a doctor, but by having someone putting the stethoscope on the fuel rig, they were able to gain a couple of tenths, even up to half a second, in the pit stop window. So there's a lot of cheeky little stuff going on like that. And yeah, the fuel rigs cost a lot of money to go around the world with. So I would love to see refueling back. I thought it was great for the racing, but I don't think it will ever happen. So yeah, that's my thoughts on refueling.
Yeah, I think the mechanic you're thinking of is Mark Priestley. I think
yes,
it is.
Mark Presley.
Yeah, it was him. Very. I like him a lot. He does tell some very good stories about his time at McLaren. And also, if you look back at 1994, which was the first year refueling came back, Benetton gained an illegal advantage by, I think they were using some kind of system where they were able to get fuel into the car quicker, but it was actually more dangerous, and it led to that pit fire with Jos Verstappen at Hockenheim. So teams, manipulate the system to try and find a better way of doing things, but it actually causes things to get worse in certain areas. Right, I'll read out a couple more comments, then we will move on, guys, to our Q&A for about 20 or so minutes. So, Francisco, what do you think about the new WEC regulations and the amount of manufacturer interest there is building around WEC? Can WEC challenge F1? I haven't actually seen the regulations. I know they're going for, or it's called the hypercar regulations for 2020, and Ferrari have actually come out and said that they are seriously interested in an LMP1 program. So can WEC challenge F1? I don't think it can. I think they can maybe be a step ahead in terms of technology compared to F1, but I don't think they're actually going to challenge it in terms of, bringing in more fans. I don't think they're going to be able to do that. Just looking at some more comments. So, Legion, technical directors and engineers are very similar to drivers in their work ethic. They both will do anything and everything, even bend a few rules or do anything to make sure they'll go faster. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to push the limits as far as possible until you're literally told to stop. That's what the drivers and engineers and technical directors all do, and they have to if they're going to find those extra tenths of a second. Right, let me just try and find a couple more if I can. Legion, please, Paddy, make a good car for my guys, Kubica and Russell. Hopefully he does. He also says Nui may not like these restrictions on his aerodynamics. Again, though, it's not massive. I don't think he's going to mind. At least it's a new challenge for him to design a great car under these regulations, but I don't think it's going to be that big of a difference, honestly. Francisco, I just think there is too much aerodynamics on the cars. I miss 2005/06/07 a lot. Yeah, those cars were pretty good. They were a lot better at following. But the one thing I hated about those cars was traction control. I hate traction control. If they brought that back, I would honestly consider forming a protest. That's how much I hate traction control. It creates boring racing. The cars become incredibly drivable when they should be hard to drive. They're Formula 1 cars. They should be difficult to drive. It shouldn't be a cakewalk driving an F1 car, and that's what it was for a few years. Thank God they got rid of it, because I don't see the enjoyment of driving an F1 car with that electronic system. And also launch control, another thing I absolutely hate. And they did also used to have this, was automatic, I think an automatic gearbox or gear selections around 2003, I think it was, where the drivers didn't even have to change gear, it did it itself. Hopefully that never comes back, because we want to see the drivers actually drive the car, not just turn the wheel and everything else does it by itself. I don't find that fun at all, so hopefully that never does come back. But there you go, guys, that is your 2019 regulations. But now, for 15 to 20 minutes, we are now going to get into our Q&A. So get your questions in the chat, and also if you're watching this after the podcast has gone up as a video, put it in the comments, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I can as soon as I can. So make sure you get your questions in, and then we'll read through some. And then we'll go, hopefully, 15 to 20 minutes. If we don't go as long as that, then maybe, again, if there's not enough questions, maybe we won't go as long as that. A keys, currently they do not have traction control, correct? No, they don't. Traction control was last in F1 in 2007. But the thing is, the teams, Nib, you'll remember this, the teams, they find ways around it, because do you remember the 2013 Renault engine map that was on the Red Bull?
Yes, I do remember at Singapore how everyone was claiming that Sebastian Vettel's Red Bull had sounded like it had traction control on it. Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, the teams, they find ways around things, and I think Renault did for that short time period, and I think also Lotus benefited from it as well. I think, they definitely benefited from that in those final few races of that season. Right, let's get into some questions then. Eric, who will be the 2019 World Champion? We did our predictions a few weeks ago, so if you can find that podcast, I think it's episode 17, I think, or episode 18, somewhere. I think 3 or 4 weeks ago. But I think I went for Lewis Hamilton and Nib went for Sebastian Vettel. So we'll see. Well, obviously we need to see pre-season and what happens. Then Simon Cragland asks, who will be the surprise of next season? Nib, I'm going to let you go first, because I actually need to think about that. That's actually quite difficult.
Okay, yeah, I don't know.
Can I just say, I think Albon will do a lot better than people think he would. Than people are thinking. I think Albon's a lot better than people think. I think people really underrate the guy. So maybe him. It's difficult. It's difficult because Giovinazzi, maybe he can surprise. Definitely possible. He does have the pace too. Yeah, that's a difficult one, but I'd probably go for Albon. I think Albon will do better than people think. And Simon Cragland says Giovinazzi will be the surprise of next season, in his opinion. Nib, do you have one, or do you still don't know?
I think Giovinazzi could be a bit of a surprise. I think in some races he will give Kimi a run for his money, but off the top of my head, no, I don't really have a major surprise for next season.
Yeah, it's quite hard to think of one, but yeah, I'll probably go for Albon. And talking of Albon, Simon Cragland also asks, Albon versus Kvyat for next year, who do we think is going to win? And he thinks Kvyat. I also think Kvyat, but it will be a lot closer than people think. Nib, do you think Kvyat or Albon?
Yeah, I also think Daniel Kvyat will beat Alexander Albon for next season.
Okay. Ben McCarthy asks Imola or Istanbul Park. For me, Istanbul. Definitely. Imola, look, Imola is a great track, a lot of history, great corners. We get it. But if you go back, and I know the track is different compared to when F1 was last there, but go and watch old races at Imola. Is there as many overtakes or real wheel-to-wheel battles at Imola compared to, the Istanbul track? I don't think there is. I don't think there is. So I prefer the Turkish Grand Prix venue. Hopefully it does come back. There has been rumours that the president of that country does want it to come back. So we'll see on that. Right, Francisco, can Sauber challenge Renault and Haas consistently next year? Sauber can go after Haas, but they won't go after Renault. I think Renault will pull away from the midfield and will be at least halfway in between Red Bull, who will be third in my opinion, and whoever's fifth. So Renault will be in Formula 1.25, and then you'll have Haas, Sauber, Force India, or not Force India, Racing Point, or whatever the name is this week. They're all in Formula 1.5 with McLaren, Williams, teams like that. But Renault, they'll be in Formula 1.25, if you know what I mean. Ben McCarthy, what are Nib's top 5 drivers ever? Go ahead and answer that then.
Ayrton Senna has to be number 1 for me, the most talented F1 driver that we have ever seen. Michael Schumacher would probably have to be second. Well, not probably, is second in my opinion. His record is incredible. And of course, happy birthday, Michael. It was his 50th birthday a couple of days ago now. And of course, we hope that his recovery is going well. Number 3 has to be Fangio. His record and in cars that he did and how dangerous the sport was back in the 50s. Absolutely incredible what he did in those days. 4th for me after his terrific season last year has to be Lewis Hamilton. His record is getting closer and closer to Michael Schumacher, which is absolutely mental to think. And now that Lewis is the 3rd oldest driver on the grid and has been for a number of years now, is pretty scary. So Lewis is gonna be number 4. Now for 5th best driver of all time, I kind of flip-flop on this all quite a bit. Sometimes I say Prost, sometimes I say Lauda, but today I'm feeling a bit of Niki Lauda, just after what he did after his crash and how he returned after the awful crash at the Nürburgring in 1976, and then obviously he returned many years later and won his 3rd world title. I think, I'm going to go with Niki Lauda there. So back over to you, Matt.
Yeah, I fully agree. That's my top 5. My top 5 also, and I think the only real argument is 5th. You could go Jim Clark, Prost, Lauda, anyone else. You could put Vettel in there if you rate Vettel highly. But yeah, I think the top 4 is kind of settled at the moment. We'll have to see what Hamilton does in 2019. But yeah, right, we'll move on to some more questions. So Simon Crackland asks, and this is also for you, Nib, who do you guys think is better than Ricciardo on the current grid? I'll go first before Nib shares his opinion. So, Hamilton, I think is. Verstappen, they've been in the same car. I think Verstappen is better. I think he's a lot faster. And after that, if you look at the 2019 grid, I would probably say that Daniel Ricciardo is the 3rd best driver on the grid, with Fernando Alonso no longer being on the grid. When it comes to, say, Kimi Räikkönen, yes, Kimi's consistent, but I think Daniel is a lot faster. I think Daniel is faster and more aggressive than Bottas. And who else am I forgetting? Gasly. I think he's better than Gasly. Charles Leclerc. Now, with Charles Leclerc, I can't really say because we don't know what Leclerc is going to be like in a top team or in a top car. So I don't think we can really say if he's better or worse than Charles Leclerc. For Vettel, well, Ricciardo beat Vettel in 2014. So I don't think I can, based on the evidence we have been given, I don't think I can possibly say that Sebastian Vettel is better than Daniel Ricciardo. I don't think I can say that. But Nib, who is, in your opinion, if anyone, better than Daniel Ricciardo on the current grid?
Come on, you know I'm not a tinfoiler with Ricciardo. No, definitely Hamilton and Verstappen are better than Ricciardo. It's been quite clear, although it's been very, very close between Verstappen and Ricciardo, that Verstappen has the edge on Ricciardo, mainly because of first lap. You know, us Aussies, we just can't take off the line. I don't know why. But then obviously Lewis is, which would be absolutely a great team. You know, I'd love to see Lewis and Ricciardo on the same team. And then, yeah, I think on the evidence that we've seen, we can't say that Vettel is better than Ricciardo or quicker than Ricciardo. You know, he beat him quite comfortably in 2014, made him look like an absolute fool on multiple occasions in 2014, especially at Monza. I will never get over that overtake, that's for sure. With Leclerc, as you said, I don't think we can really tell whatsoever at all, because they haven't been in cars which have relative pace to each other, so I don't think it would be fair to compare. But yeah, I think I think Max and Lewis are definitely the two drivers that are 100% better than Dan.
Yeah, there's someone who's said in the chat, I think he's referencing me saying and also you saying that we can't say Vettel is better than Ricciardo, but it's Mr. Random Guy. He says, it depends if you are measuring them at their peak. I actually think Vettel is better now than he was during his Red Bull days. I honestly think that. I think he is more polished in certain areas of his game. Don't get me wrong, he still makes mistakes, and 2018 was a very poor season, considering the mistakes he made and what he did in the second half of the season. But I think, as an overall driver, I think Vettel's better now than he was in 2013 or 2014. I definitely think that, and I think also the real progression after that time period at Red Bull was 2015. I think he proved a lot of people wrong in 2015 and also proved me wrong, because I was also one of those people that thought he could only win races in a dominant car, and he proved me wrong. But he hasn't proved me wrong when it comes to winning championships in the best car, so he has to prove me wrong on that. But I think Vettel is better for sure than he was in 2014. Also, 2014, I think because of how far Red Bull were off Mercedes, I just don't think he was mentally prepared to be going from winning, races constantly to finishing at best in third place. I don't think he was mentally prepared for such a thing. Ricciardo, he had nothing to lose going in there, so that's why I think mentally he was a lot better that season, was because I don't think he really cared if the Red Bull car was winning or not. So yeah, there you go. But right, let me read through some more. A-Keys, as their careers mature, who will take more World Drivers' Championships, Charles Leclerc or Max Verstappen? If you asked me and Nib this time next year, maybe we'll be able to give you a better answer, because we don't know how good Leclerc is, truly, until after this season. Because Max, since 2016, basically has been in a top car. Charles Leclerc, this is his first season in a car that is comparable to Hamilton, especially, of course, Vettel, Verstappen, drivers like that. So I don't think we can really say right now, because we don't know how good Leclerc really is. So I'll wait on that. But Francisco saying great tribute to Michael on the F1 YouTube channel. That is true. Also, just to let you guys know, and I'll say this again at the end in case you guys missed this, but This Week in F1 is returning tomorrow, but it is going to be a bit different than it usually is. So there will be news in This Week in F1, which I will cover probably in the first half of the stream, but the theme of tomorrow's This Week in F1 is Michael Schumacher and his 50th birthday celebration. Basically what I'm going to do is go through his career, give my opinion on his career. You guys can too, so make sure to come along to that. 3 PM UK time, I'll be going live for that. But yeah, This Week in F1 is returning tomorrow, where I will give a review of Michael's career. But we also, from Ben McCarthy, I believe, in our Discord server. By the way, the link to our Discord server is in the description down below if you want to ask questions for the podcast or be involved in the Discord. He put a question of what is Michael Schumacher's best race and his best F1 season. Now, Nib, before we came on, you said that you don't really think you're qualified to answer that, and I don't blame you because, well, the majority of his career was before you really started getting into F1. But given the races I've gone back and watched and what I've seen, I would say his best race was probably the 1996 Spanish Grand Prix. And his best F1 season, in my opinion, would have to be it'd have to be 2002. I'm thinking maybe 2000 or 1998. That was another very, very good season from Michael. But yeah, I think 2002, you just kind of have to say, was his best F1 season. Right, we'll go through about 3 more questions, I think, and then we will come to the end of this podcast. So, right, Francisco, as the years pass, I'm convinced that Vettel only won because of Adrian Newey. I don't think he only won because of him. I think there are races where he didn't necessarily need that amazing car to win races, but when it comes to winning the titles, I think you cannot deny he benefited a lot from being in that Red Bull. But Mario Master says or asks, what do you expect the qualifying battles between Verstappen and Gasly to be? So, there's 21 races, so I think it'll be, say, Verstappen will qualify him in about 15 or 16 at least. Nib, do you think that, or do you think Gasly will do better?
I think Verstappen will outqualify Gasly in pretty much every single race. I don't see Gasly challenging Verstappen at all. Verstappen is one of the best drivers on the grid, and Gasly is not. It's as simple as that. And Mario Masters has asked in terms of margin. So I think on average it'll probably be about 3 to 4 tenths of a second in terms of the margin. I really don't see Gasly challenging Verstappen at all.
Yeah, I think honestly it's going to be similar to the Alonso Van Dorn in terms of time gap, not necessarily who outqualifies who how many times, because Alonso outqualified Van Dorn every time in 2018, but in terms of the time difference between them, I think it will be very similar, if not the same, to Fernando Alonso against Stoffel Van Dorn. It's going to be, at best for Gasly, a quarter of a second. He just doesn't have the speed to match Max Verstappen. He doesn't. So, yeah. Eric, I can't wait to see if the new regulations will work with better racing. I'm so excited. So are we. We can't wait. And I also cannot wait for pre-season testing to see the cars up close and also see how the cars are performing, especially in the high-speed corners with these new aerodynamics. I don't think, again, they're really going to be that different, but we will see. Ben McCarthy, what is the biggest F1 controversy? In my opinion, it is Spygate. Has to be Spygate because of the people involved and the teams involved and the end result. You could say Crashgate, but Crashgate affected one race. Spygate affected a full season, and you could argue even more than that. So, yeah, I think Spygate is the biggest controversy of them all. Nib, because I'm so bad at reading out Haas puns, can you read out JB's, please?
JB says in chat, hello, Chazza.
Thank you very much for that, Nib, and also JB. Yeah, I'm very, very bad at reading out Haas puns, so I'm just not great here. Francisco, was Crashgate proved? Yep, it was. It was proved to be. It was proved to be, you know, the people who instructed it to happen. It was proved that it did happen. So yeah, but again, Crashgate, it affected one race. Spygate affected an entire season, and again, if not more than that, you could argue that McLaren benefited from that information for 2008. You could argue that, even though the FIA did investigate McLaren to see if they used it for the 2008 car, you could argue they still did. Ben McCarthy, are all the Ferrari World Drivers' Championship winning cars red? I think you know the answer to that. Right, I'll try and find one more if I can. But if anyone has one more final question you want me and him to answer, put it in the chat right now, and we will answer it. I'm just trying to see if I missed any that we can add on top of that. Eric, I think Eric's asking, I don't know if he's asking who's going to win the F2 Championship, or he's maybe talking about who'll be the surprise next season, referencing George Russell, but I guess we can answer that now. Nib, we don't really know the majority of the field in terms of how good they are, but who do you think will win in F2 in 2019?
I have absolutely no idea. I haven't looked at the F2 grid. Obviously, you know, hype train my Mick Schumacher, you know, but no, I have no idea who's going to be the F2 champion. Of course, I will watch the championship, but at the moment, I have absolutely no idea.
Yeah, again, we don't really know much about the field, but Mick Schumacher, you know, you got to mention him. Nick De Vries, that's another one. I think Louis Delatraz is another one that's impressing people. But yeah, I feel as though the field for F2 this coming season, is not as good as 2018, where we had Russell, Norris, Albon, De Vries, Markelov. Very solid and quite good talent-wise, top 5 drivers in the championship. But the final question is from JB. What are you guys most excited for 2019 with F1? For me, it is Charles Leclerc versus Sebastian Vettel at Ferrari. I cannot wait to see, 1, how Leclerc does in the Ferrari, and 2, how that battle shapes up. As I said, and by the way, if you haven't seen my video on Charles Leclerc with Ferrari for 2019, which I did 2 days ago, it's in the description down below. It's called Is Charles Leclerc Ready to Drive for Ferrari? It's in the description down below. Don't forget to go and watch that right now. But yeah, I cannot wait to see how Leclerc does, and to see the dynamic of Leclerc and Vettel, and if Leclerc can upset the apple cart of Sebastian Vettel at Ferrari earlier. I'm very interested to see if he can or not, because I feel as though, and I said in that video, if Leclerc doesn't start strong, then he's kind of going to lose out to Vettel in 2019. And I think he does have to start strong to actually beat Vettel and upset him and maybe go for the World Drivers' Championship. Nib, what are you looking forward to most in 2019?
Certainly Leclerc versus Vettel is going to be very exciting, but what I'm most excited for is to see Renault winning the World Championship. No, of course, I'm kidding. Of course, I'm kidding. But I think I'm just really excited for the season to start. You know, more and more teams are now announcing the car launch dates in just over a month's time. Certainly keep updating Chaz about that. So, that's you know, just the whole hype for the new season is going to start building over the next month, and I absolutely can't wait for the 2019 Formula One World Championship to get underway.
And also, I think we haven't kind of covered this, and I think someone asked before in the chat. We might as well quickly go over it now. What do you make of Renault's comments about their games with their car?
Well, I am very excited about what Renault are coming out and saying. You know, I've been very excited about what Renault have said in the past, you know, and they've just failed, but mainly about the car. That's where most of the promising stuff is coming from, is about the car, because that's certainly where they need to improve on. You know, they probably had the best, or the 5th best car last season, so if they can make any improvement in that and jump clear of Haas, they will then be able to comfortably be 4th in the championship, and I think that has to be their goal for this upcoming season.
Yeah, with the Renault car, I don't think necessarily getting the power unit right is the most important thing. Yes, they do need to improve it, of course, but for me, I'm more focused progress-wise on their aerodynamics and their chassis than the power unit, because we know they're not going to get really any closer to Mercedes and Ferrari, maybe a couple of tenths, but it's not really going to pull them massively closer. If they can get the aero and the chassis right on their car, they could, if Red Bull Honda does not work in 2019, they could be right there, you never know, for a couple of podiums, but we'll have to see. But that is it for this podcast. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed, and also thank you to Nib for coming along again as ever.
Cheers, mate, and thank you, of course, to everyone in the chat as per usual.
Yeah, thanks to everyone in the chat for watching. Has been great as always to go over these new regulations and just kind of give you the lowdown on what is going down for 2019. But anyway, guys, as I said, this is it for the podcast today. Don't forget to subscribe on the bottom right of the screen. You can do it there, or click on my channel name, go to my channel page and subscribe to the channel. Like this video, comment down below what you thought of this video, and comment down below what you think of each new rule, and also comment down below whether you think the new 2019 regulations are going to improve the racing. I really want to hear what you guys think, so make sure to put it in the comment section down below. Also, as I said, I think about 10 minutes ago, This Week in F1 is returning tomorrow at the same time this podcast went live. 3 PM UK time tomorrow, This Week in F1 returns, and it is kind of a Michael Schumacher special because it was a couple of days ago his 50th birthday. So that is coming tomorrow for you guys, but also don't forget to check out my latest video. It should be popping up, if you're watching this recorded, it should be popping up on the screen somewhere around the screen. But don't forget to check out my latest video, the Is Charles Leclerc Ready to Drive for Ferrari video. I want to hear you guys' opinion on that and whether you think he's ready and how he's going to compete against Sebastian Vettel in 2019. Also, don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description. That's the best way for notifications for my videos. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Chaz6110 and check out my website, ChazzaHDF1, also in the description. By the way, If you do go to the website and things look different, we are currently trying to change some things and make it look a bit better. So it is kind of, I guess, under a slight bit of maintenance. But guys, until the next podcast next Saturday, the time will be different, by the way. Next Saturday, it won't be 3 p.m. It's probably going to be, say, an hour earlier at 2 p.m. UK time. I'll explain further tomorrow. But yeah, the podcast will be back next Saturday at 2 p.m. UK time, live here on ChazzaHDF1. And until the next live stream tomorrow at 3 p.m. UK time, it's been me, ChazzaHD. Goodbye.